I'd like to call the meeting to order for the Village of Broadview Finance Committee meeting for May 7th. The time is 7:05 p.m. We'll start with our introductions. I'm Trustee Judy Abraham. I am the Chair of the Finance Committee. To my left,
Paul Kirsten, Broadview Police Department.
Leticia Jones, Village Administrator.
Trustee John Tierney.
Trustee Marina Horn.
Tim Hicks, Director of Finance.
Tom Hood, the Budget Director.
at this time I ask that we stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We could please take a quick moment of silence or reflection. I mean, obviously, we've heard the news today of a shooting at a school, so if we could please just take a moment. Thank you. Tonight at this meeting for our Finance Committee, and I want to welcome our residents that are watching, what we did is we've asked the auditors to attend tonight. So they're going to do a presentation on the village's financial situation and go over some stuff, and then the trustees will be able to ask some questions. If anybody does have any additional questions out in the public, if you could please hold on to them until our village board meeting, so we'd appreciate that. Other than that, I'd like to introduce from Baker Tilly, the advisor. So if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and welcome.
All right, well, good evening. It's good to be with you. Jason Coyle with Baker Tilly. I'm the partner on your engagement. So I'm going to be reviewing the financial statements for the year ended April 30th, 2018. So about a year ago now, but the audit's been concluded for a while. It's just some scheduling issues trying to get to the meeting to present to you. So I'm going to go over two documents. One is, and the first one I'll go over is your financial statements. If you happen to have them in front of you, I'll comment on a few things in there and reference the page numbers. And then the second one I'll go over is the one that is called Communication to Those Charged with Governance and Management, more commonly called the management letter. So in your financial statements, though, and if you have questions as I go through, feel free to ask. No need to hold your comments and questions till the end. First thing I always like to talk about in your financial statements is on page 1, page 2, and page 2, and that's the opinion that comes from our firm. So the rest of the information in the document is village information, village financial information. So the audit opinion is unchanged from previous years. It's what we call an unmodified or unqualified opinion. It's the highest level of assurance we could give on the information within your financial statements. And basically what that means is that someone can use these financial statements in all material respects to evaluate the health of the village, the financial health of the village. The only change in the opinion this year is a reference to the fact that you implemented a new reporting standard. The Governmental Accounting Standards Board, or GASB for short, is the governing body that sets the standards for what your financial statements look like. And you're required to implement a new one related to other post-employment benefits, or OPEB, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But there is a paragraph in the opinion, if you were to compare it to last year, that references the implementation of that. Starting on page 3 of your financial statements and going for a few pages is a section called the Management's Discussion and Analysis. And I know not everyone, of course we're at a finance committee, but not everyone who opens up these financial statements really understands how to read them. So I always like to reference to the governing body and to anybody else to just read through the Management's Discussion and Analysis. It does a good job of kind of summarizing what went on through the year. And management points out some of the bigger fluctuations from the prior year. So I always encourage everyone to take a look at this if you don't want to look at the rather lengthy document. The one page that I always like is page 10 and 11, which puts into pie charts on page 10 where your money's coming from, where your revenues. For example, 45% of your funding comes in the form of property tax. And then on page 11 is a pie chart of where your fund's going. 58, not surprisingly, 58%, a large percentage of your expenditures go back to public safety, to the police and the fire department. So I think that's just a nice pictorial of where your funds come from and then where your money's going. If we look at page 15, if you happen to have the book in front of you, this is what we call the statement of net position. So this is where we take all of the funds of the village and collapse them down into two different columns. And also we place on here all of your capital assets. So that's anything that you own that has a long life. Police cars, fire trucks, buildings, roads even. Those get included on here because those are assets of the village. And also placed on here is any long-term liabilities. So if you have any debt outstanding, your long-term pension liabilities also get placed on here. As I mentioned earlier, other post-employment benefits, that is a new liability that got placed on here during the year. And another post-employment benefit is something you give to a retiree after they retire other than pension. So usually what that is some form of subsidized health insurance. And so there's obviously a long-term liability related to that. So again, for the first time, that was placed on your financial statements here. So you have two columns. One's governmental activities, which is most of your funds, and then business type activities, which is basically your water fund. And down at the very bottom is your total net position. And you'll see on here you have a rather large negative unrestricted net position. And that's really driven by the pension liabilities and the other post-employment benefit liabilities. Those totaled a little over $40 million, your pension liabilities and your other post-employment benefit liabilities. So if you didn't have those in here, and now you do, I know, but if you didn't, that would be a positive number there at the very bottom. It was, like I said, this year that the other post-employment benefits got placed on your balance sheet for the first time, and then I think it was about 5 years ago that the pension liabilities were placed here. They'd always been disclosed in the notes, but these are relatively new standards still. We'll flip over a couple more pages to probably something that's a little bit more familiar to you on page 21 and 22. These are the revenues and expenditures of your governmental funds. So the leftmost column on page 21 is your general fund. That's your primary operating fund. You might refer to it as your corporate fund internally. And you'll see during the year that fund lost a little bit of money. Your revenues were not sufficient to cover your expenses by about $332,000 at the end of the year. So that brought your fund balance to $4.2 million as of the end of the year. If we look at all these funds overall, you'll see the fund balance is decreased on page 22 near the bottom by $4.8 million, bringing your fund balances of the governmental activities to a little over $11 million. I want to point out, though, that a large portion of that, about $3.5 million of that deficit, if you will, was related to one of your TIFs where you gave money back to other taxing bodies because you're ending that TIF. That was $3.5 million. And then $1.3 million was capital and project expenditures, so investments back into your community in the form of capital projects. So, sometimes we see negatives here and we jump to conclusions, but there's some very logical explanations why there was a deficit of $4.8 million during the year. And I'll just point out one other thing in here, and that's on page 26. This is your what we call your proprietary fund, your water and sewer fund, as you call it internally. These types of funds are meant to be self-supporting, so they don't get property taxes. They're meant to be supported through the charges for services, water bills, water rates, things like that. And that is achieving its goal. You had a positive operating income of just under $300,000 during the year. And so basically, at least at this point in time, what that means is that your water rates and sewer rates are maintaining this fund. So obviously that could change in the future if there are things that need to be implemented, such as improvements in your infrastructure. There's a lot more information in your financial statements after that I won't get into. There's notes to the financial statements. There's budget to actual comparison schedules of all your funds in the back. So there's a lot of information in here, should you want to take a look at it. But that's all I was going to touch on within the financial statements themselves. And maybe I'll pause there to ask if there's any questions you might have on the financial statements before I get into the management letter.
Okay. Trustee Horn, do you have any questions at this point?
You say you're going to get us in a management letter?
Yeah, this other one is the one I'll talk about, this communication. I'll talk about that next.
That's the charge with governance and
Yes.
management?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
just making sure. So I don't have, I'll wait till afterwards. Thank
Okay,
you.
you wait for that time. Trustee Tierney, do you have any questions?
None right now.
I do have a statement. On page 3, you listing our financial highlights. Do you want to just recap those? I thought those were very informative. On
Yeah,
page
sure,
3.
yeah, that's
thought
why I
that
always
was-
like to point out the management discussion analysis, because it puts some great summaries in here. So,
Yeah,
you know, that first bullet point says the Village of Broadview's net position decreased by $1.4 million and left the village at the end of the year with a net position of negative 4.9. During the year, expenses of 24.8 million exceeded revenues of 23.4 million, resulting in a decreased net position of $1.4 million, which we just said. Net position of the business type activities, so your water and sewer, increased by $0.3 million, while the net position of the governmental activities decreased by $1.7 million. General revenues accounted for $15.5 million, or 77% of all your governmental revenues.
okay.
And program-specific revenues, which are charges for services, permit fees, things like that, and other grants accounted for $44.4 million of your total revenues. Governmental activities had $21.6 million in expenses for governmental activities. However, only $4.4 million of those were offset by specific charges for services, which meant the rest was basically made up through property taxes and things like that.
Okay.
At the end of the year, your unassigned fund balance of the general fund was $4.2 million, so there's different categories of fund balance. Some have more restrictions placed on them. The unassigned, obviously, you could do pretty much whatever you want with it, and that was at $4.82 million, excuse me, as of the end of the year. And then your long-term liabilities increased during the year by $45.7 million, and that relates to, you know, the net pension liabilities and things like that. So it wasn't such that you incurred more debt, but you know, those numbers fluctuate during the year.
All right. And
Can
then,
you repeat the last statement that you made? I didn't hear you.
Regarding the long-term liabilities,
Yes.
yeah, so your total long-term liabilities at the end of the year were $45.7 million. And those fluctuate during the year, but most of your long-term liabilities relate to your pension liabilities and your other post-employment benefit liabilities. You really don't have a whole lot of long-term debt outstanding other than that. So. And you are contributing to those plans, to the pension plans, on a regular basis, and so you are paying down those liabilities, but it takes a long time to pay those down, unfortunately, given the magnitude of those.
so, and then the other question would be, compared to the previous year in 2017, when you guys did that, obviously, we've been putting, more programs in place and policies, you know, with the administration. So has there been a change that you've seen in 1 year, or is it going to take a little bit more time?
Financially minded, or controls, or which?
Either one you want to comment on.
It's hard for me as the auditor to understand, you know, what the impact of different policy changes are necessarily. You know, most policy changes, though, take a longer time to fully understand what the financial implication of that might be over time. Like I said, during the year, your governmental fund activities saw a decrease in fund balance, but there were explanations for quite a big portion of that, $3.5 million going back to the other taxing bodies in your TIF fund, and then $1.3 million in capital improvement expenditures. So those are, you know, that right there is $4.8 million in expenditures that have supported reasons for them. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So we've been pretty consistent in our practices and in implementing different measures, and I know between Director Hicks and Director Hood, I know they've been very diligent in what they've been doing, so we definitely appreciate that. So I'm sure they've been very helpful in the changes that have been taking place in the current financial status of the village. So in your opinion, I mean, I guess the stability from reading all this, I mean, we're on stable ground and we're moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I always like to look at is I compare your general fund balance to your operating expenditures in that fund during the year. So you had $15.7 million in expenditures and you have $4.2 million in fund balance. So I can't quite do that in my head, but that's about a third approximately that you have in fund balance compared to your expenditures. That means you could go a third of the year without receiving any money and still have money in your fund balance to pay for your operating expenses. So, you know, there's different rules of thumb as to what that ratio should be. So you're about 33%. there's no right or wrong answer, but that's a nice position to be in, to be able to go a third of the year without receiving revenue and still be able to pay your bills in your primary operating fund. So.
Good to know, good to know. So I'm glad what we're doing, our measures. Again, thank you, gentlemen, down there, for keeping us on task and keeping the department heads. And again, with the department heads, they obviously have to do some things. And I know as we could go on in the book, there's going to be where you've broken everybody down, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
later on in here, there's a lot more detail on each fund.
So then we can actually
You,
see
you
what
could go,
everybody's
yeah,
doing.
it's by department, and so you could look at a lot of detail back there if you so wanted to, yep.
Okay. Anybody else? You guys have
No,
any
I'm
more?
just waiting to hear about this, because there are some changes I see in the future for us, and
Okay.
we'll talk about those, yeah.
So
yeah.
you want to continue
Yeah,
on?
so the other document we have is what we call communication to those charged with governance and management. Informally, you might hear the term called management letter, and that's kind of what we refer to this as. So when we come in to do the audit of the village, one of the things we do is we look at the internal controls or your checks and balances. We do that to allow us to plan our audit. We want to understand, where there might be, quote, risks in your operations, and allow us to apply additional audit tests potentially to those areas. But the byproduct of that is that sometimes we have recommendations for improvement in your internal controls. And that's what this document is right here. So this document does not include all the controls that you might have in place. We don't comment on the good things that you're doing, if you will. We just comment on the things that we would like to see some improvement on. And so that's what's in here. And I don't know how in-depth you want me to go. One of the things I would point out is there's a few things that aren't in here that were in here last year. And so that's in large part to having Tim be here for the full year as the finance director. So, last year there was some lapses in having a finance director for the entire year, and that caused some breakdown in certain controls that we were able to see remedied this year. So that's good. For the most part, the recommendations in here are similar to what they were in the prior year. I think the primary thing that might have been modified since the prior year was related to bank reconciliations. That's one thing that we would recommend putting around some additional controls, and I know I talked to the mayor about this as well, just making sure that those are being done in a timely manner, so that when we come in to do the audit, if nothing else, when we come in to do the audit, they're ready to go for us. And yeah, it just helps to make sure that, everything's all the revenues that are coming in are getting posted appropriately, and that the financial pictures that you guys are seeing on a monthly basis have all the information in there. So they were obviously done before the conclusion of the audit. We wouldn't have been able to conclude the audit without the bank recs being completed. And so they were done as of by the conclusion of the audit, excuse me. So. And then like I said, there's some other recommendations in here, many of which are carryovers from the previous year that, some of these require more resources potentially to be able to remedy. And that's obviously a decision that sometimes governing bodies have to make about potentially giving more resources to be able to remedy some of these. But I could go through these in more depth if you want, or if you have specific questions, it sounded like, I'd be happy to answer those as well.
Trustee Horn, do you have anything specific on that document on the government and management?
I don't know if it's necessarily a question, but it's just my interpretation, so I just want to make sure if I am interpreting information incorrectly, you tell me so I can correct my thinking. When it comes to the audit specifically, when you begin to perform your audit, what inputs are required for you to successfully perform your audit?
Well, that could be a long answer.
I'm listening.
When we come in to do the audit, we provide the management team with what we call a PBC, or prepared by client list. And so that's a long list. It's usually 4 or 5 pages long of documents that we would like to see when we start the audit. And so, in an ideal world, all that information would be provided to us at the beginning of the audit. That's not always the case. By any stretch of the imagination, when we come to a client, is everything ready for us? But if I was to have the ideal, that's what I would like. And so we need all that information to be able to support our audit, to go through and identify what all your balances were during the year, and then test that those balances were appropriate. And some of the information isn't necessarily even financially related. We look at all the minutes, for example, of the board, just to see what went on and what was approved. So, some are financial related and some might not be. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's the kind of information we look for. There's a very lengthy list of the information that we need when we come to do the audit. Obviously, by the time we conclude the audit, we have obtained all that information because we need to be able to have that to support the audit opinion. And some of that will come in, if not the first day, then over the course of the audit until we're able to conclude the audit.
Okay, so I'll rephrase it because you said it's a lengthy file or a lengthy request of deliverables you need in order to perform the audit. The reason I'm asking that question is because when I read through everything, I thought the information was very easy to understand, so thank you. Thought it was well prepared. What I took from it was all the financial statements and the financial position of the village was in a good place. So that was a plus, had a warm, fuzzy feeling. It was like, good, they're doing a great job, good. But when I read through this, the idea that came to mind was the fact that a deficiency in internal controls implies to me compromised data, or you can't trust the data. Data integrity may not always be in place, and it can be improved, whether it's bad or...
I didn't understand that.
Oh, sorry, that's technology. I got it off. It's picking up my voice, excuse me. And so my point is that if we can improve on data integrity, the information that you get in order to produce the audit, it would seem like we need to invest in more sophisticated software.
Well, potentially, yeah. I do want to kind of correct one of the things you said, is that the checks and balances or controls doesn't necessarily mean that the data you're getting, the information you're getting right now is not accurate. What the controls do is just verify that there's no errors that to light. So it doesn't necessarily mean that what you're seeing is inaccurate. These just help verify and support through the checks and balances that nothing is in there. So just a slight correction.
Well, so my point is though, to your point, the information that is given it doesn't mean that the information is corrupt or we don't know, and that's the that's the point.
Yeah, right.
It's a question mark.
Right.
And so just as an area of improvement, the reason I'm bringing it up is because we're coming up on budgets and all that type of stuff. It would just seem like it would be in our best interest and to tighten up on the internal controls and to invest in more sophisticated software because data integrity matters. The output of your documents, the financial statements, show a plus because the information you got is going to derive a plus. But if the information you got was not 100% accurate or we don't have tight controls in place, then there's still a question mark. That's my point.
Yeah.
And so that's what I read. That's when I read this, like I said, I thought, good job, Broadview. And then I read this and said, we have a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah, first of all, like I said, several of these comments have been around for a while, and so I don't want to necessarily quote-unquote pin all these on, Tim, for example.
I'm not putting it on them at all, period.
But there is definitely, I would say, room for improvement in your internal controls, and like I said, those could cost money. System improvements are expensive, but they can be quite beneficial, if done correctly, to improving the controls. Many new softwares have what I call bells and whistles associated with them, which might provide controls within the system, within the package, if you will, that you might not have right now in your current package. So.
Did you have to, for the document that you required for like the list of deliverables you needed, did you get everything or did you have to do some yourself?
Well, we eventually got everything, or we did some work to assist the village in coming up with certain numbers. Most specifically, at the end of the year, you run primarily on a cash basis during the year. So as a check is paid, it gets recorded as an expenditure. When something hits the bank, it gets recorded as a revenue. Your financial statements are on what we call a modified accrual basis of accounting. So that means at the end of the year, you need to come up with a listing of everybody, for example, that you owe at the end of the year that you might not have paid yet. You received a computer before the end of the year, but you didn't pay the bill till next year. That's what we call an accounts payable. So that's something that needs to be done for your financial statements at the end of the year, but you just do that one time a year. Same thing, people might owe the village money. You expect money to come in. It was owed to you as of the end of the year. That's what we call an accounts receivable. So we assisted with the development of some of those accruals, is what we call those, as of the end of the year. Again, it's not something you do on a monthly basis. It's something you do one time a year. So that is something we, during the course of the audit, worked with the finance team to assist in some of that.
Did I hear you correctly when I hear that you say you performed or completed the accruals that you then audited?
Well, we help compile them, and then we apply audit tests on top of that, yeah, but it's all your information. So we get, for example, accounts payable, we look at all of your subsequent disbursements after the end of the year, and then go back and do tests upon those to see what was in accounts payable.
Okay.
So it's, you know, it's from your information, though.
That's it for now. Thank you.
During budget time last year, I believe we talked with the directors that we were looking to get some upgrades to our software, our computers and all that stuff. I don't know if it's in the budget this year, but I'm hoping it is. But we made it a priority to get that going. So things that, like, if somebody owed us some money, it would kick out something that says, this person's overdue, let's send them another reminder, get our money. Things like that will take care of these human errors that happen, not intentionally, of course, but just correct it and tighten it up a little bit. I also noticed there were some policy changes that might need to be made, but that's, again, internal, and that's up to the board to decide those and get those going. But all in all, I thought it was a pretty good report. Just some things we need to tighten up, but I think we're in the right direction. Maybe Tom and Tim could talk about the computers and where we stand with those.
You know, actually, before we go there, could you maybe explain a little bit for the other trustees exactly what you're doing in the audit when we supply you with the PVC items? Because essentially what we're giving you, for example, I'll use the summary of all the Illinois Department of Revenue's transfers, and then you're basically comparing our numbers to outside sources to verify it.
Yeah, in some circumstances we do. For example, a really easy example is your property taxes. I mean, a large percentage of your revenue comes in the form of property taxes. Well, that all gets distributed through the county. So we're able to go to the county and get a confirmation from the county of how much they distributed to you during the year, and then we compare that back to what did you record as revenue in the form of property taxes. So yeah, that's an example of one of the audit tests that we do. Similarly with bank accounts, we go to the bank and we get what we call a confirmation from the bank. How much did the village of Broadview hold in their bank account as of the end of the fiscal year? And they confirm that to us. So we don't look at your bank statements, for example. We actually go to the bank independently and we get the confirmation of that. Now, obviously there's going to be certain reconciling items from that to what is shown here, outstanding checks and things like that, and we apply tests to those as well. But yeah, there's many things that we go to an outside party to confirm. Governments are kind of unique that way because you receive so many different revenue sources. We could go to the state as well and get sales tax and income tax, how much they distributed to you, and confirm that back to what you recorded in your general ledger. So, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that part of your job is to confirm that the data we're giving you is accurate, and it will help us find where maybe something was missed.
Yeah, I mean, that is the job of the audit, is to verify that the information in your financial statements is accurate, what we call in all material respects. So obviously, we're not going to audit down to the very last penny. You know, we use what we call a threshold of materiality, but that is the purpose, is to verify that the information is accurate in all material respects. So.
Do you want to speak in regards to the system?
Yeah. Well, it's we currently use Locus, which is a system used by a lot of municipalities, and it's a good system. There's better systems that are more modern that can be used. I think we've expended a lot of capital for computers, but in terms of having a totally different or a new accounting system, they're very expensive to purchase and to implement. And so what we're trying to do now is leverage Locus and utilize it to the fullest capability, so that once we get in a position that we're fully utilizing Locus, then it makes it easier to transition. It's like buying a brand new car when you have a used car and you haven't even putting a lot of miles on the used car. So it makes the most sense from a cost effectiveness point of view to utilize Locus to its full capabilities before we look to transition off of it to something that's more expensive and more. And then the other thing is having the personnel that have the capability of using it. So right now we have a great, Leticia does a great job, but beyond, and then the individuals that are there, but when you have a more sophisticated system, you need a more sophisticated staff to run that system. And so until we get to that point, I don't think we would look to change systems, because we still, we don't utilize, we're just now, we purchased the fixed asset module, but we have to implement that, put all the cost in it. We don't use the purchasing module as we should in terms of issuing requisitions and encumbrance accounting, things like that would help us. So we're just getting to, fully leverage the system before we look to move on from it.
Good evening. So I do want to just elaborate on the financial software. LOSIS is the system that we have. When this administration first came into place, that's what we inherited, was the LOSIS system, but it was not adequately and properly used at the full capacity that it's capable of doing so. So now the issue that we had when we first got here was the server, and you all know that it was a server issue that could not accommodate the softwares, but now that we have an updated server, we're able to implement the different modules that LOSIS are able to accommodate us. So for us to move to a more technical, high-level financial software, that don't make sense financially for us to move in that direction, like Director Hicks said. But we have to keep in mind what we inherited when we came here. When we came here, a lot of the financial situation was not even being utilized at its full capacity. So that's number one. Number two, it takes time for administration staff to kind of learn the system, figure out what's going on and what's going to be best practices as we move forward with that. And then once we identify some of the deficiencies that we may have, then we start looking at enhancing, like we've added a couple of modules, and I don't know them all by name, but we have added several modules to the LOSIS system so that we're able to have accurate accounting practices in place. We didn't have that in the past, and for many years, the village didn't implement best practices as it related to the software. So for us to sit here and say we should be changing things, first let's learn what we have, and let's bring us up to speed in the different modules that LOSIS have, because like Director Hicks said, I mean, there's still several municipalities that use that platform. It's just we've been behind for the last probably 20 plus years using the system, and now we're getting a staff that's becoming more accustomed to using it. Sandra is doing a good job with it. Tisa is doing a good job with it. Tom is able to pull different reports out of it and making sure everything is in the right section, where in the past, everything was done in an Excel spreadsheet. That makes no sense when we have a functioning software, but the issue was not the software, the issue was the server. And so we have an updated server that can accommodate the needs of the village at large, not just, a little bit. We got a highly functioning server now, so we should be working at a full capacity as it relates to the software that we have. So I just wanted to just elaborate on that a little bit. Thank you.
Because I know at one time, LOSIS, if you were on one station, you couldn't get on, you couldn't have somebody go on to it from another station.
And that's true, and
And
that's
that's
what,
been corrected.
yeah, so we have purchases more license, user license. The issue was they only had so many user licenses that people can have access to. So now everybody have the licenses so that we can use it at multiple stations. So when you come into the village, you got cashiers that can actually use it at the 2 workstations, and then we have LOSIS where we can have backup support. So Lily have it on her desktop, Sandra have it on her desktop, and Tisa have it on her desktop, and then it's in the finance team desktop. So we have the proper licenses so that we can accommodate the needs of the village.
So the information should be going in a lot faster.
Yeah, so as we go forward, like we do in the PO and the requisition type things, we create more policies so that we can be more efficient. And so we didn't have policies in place, so I'm glad that we have a finance committee meeting that can adapt a lot of these. We'll make recommendations to the board to adopt a lot of policies as we move forward. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to emphasize something. So I don't think I didn't want to imply that we need to purchase new software. What I brought up was the integrity of the data, not necessarily purchasing new software. If the system isn't being used to its full capacity, that only supports my argument. That only supports the argument, and it's not to nobody's fault or anything like that. That's not what I'm implying. What I'm implying is just focusing on the fact that using the system to its fullest capability, I think that's a good point. That's what necessarily has to get done. But because the system has not been used to its fullest capability for decades upon decades upon decades, the output that was given to us, all I'm arguing is that I probably will have more questions and need to talk maybe more with the person doing it versus looking at the numbers, because the input may or may have not been 100%
I think you're taking
accurate.
that the wrong way. So it's not that there's nothing wrong with the system, right? So you have the engine behind the system is why we couldn't utilize it to its full capability. Basically, we had a hamster in the back office that was running a wheel that was acting as the server. So anything that happened, the system would go down because we wasn't running the system on an adequate server that would allow us to utilize it to its full capability.
I don't disagree with that.
So there's no data issue. There's nothing wrong with the integrity of the data, which is attested by the fact that we have a clean audit.
No, that's not, hold on a second. So I understand why that's being said. Let me just read a statement.
So
A deficiency in internal control
It has
exists.
nothing to do with data integrity.
So-
That's process and procedures.
Let me ask you a question. When you get your information,
Let me finish.
I understand what you're implying.
I don't think you do. So when you look at the management rep letter, that's telling management that there are room for improvement because we do not have either the staff, the resources, or the capability to solidify the controls that the auditors would like to see for that particular area. So that, and when you look at the control deficiencies that are outlined in the management rep letters are things that either, one, we don't have, there's a separation of duties issue, which means that we don't have the necessary people to separate out the tasks that would allow for the separation of duties that would eliminate the deficiency in the internal controls, or we just haven't addressed the issue in terms of putting the necessary documented process and procedures in place that would address the issues that tell the auditors that we have the procedure or the policies to address what they see as an internal control deficiency. That's what the management rep letter is about, and that's what it's spotlighting. It has nothing to do with the integrity of the data that's coming out of the system.
So let me ask you a question. Thank you for that. When you got your information, your inputs, did you get a report or did you get a text file with just a bunch of raw data?
Well, we get various different forms of information.
Give me an example.
So I mean, the most well, there's lots of different kinds. The most primary one is the trial balance, which is the data dump, if you will, from your system.
And data dump from the system?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
And that supports all, that is all the transactions that went on during the year.
Okay.
Right.
So let me talk about the data dump from the system. That speaks my language. I completely understand that. Do you recall in that data dump, when you consumed that information, were there any duplicate records?
Oh, I mean, I don't recall necessarily
Yeah,
that.
we
I
don't
mean,
know. Do you know if there were any missing files?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
And so, and you spoke earlier about reconciliation. And we confirmed, or if I heard you correctly, the reconciliation wasn't 100%.
The bank reconciliations, right, correct.
And that was reflected in that data dump from the system, which, and just so you guys, the definition of data integrity relates specifically to 3 points: missing files, duplicate records, reconciliation. If those 3 things are not 100% in place to its fullest capacity coming from the system, data integrity is compromised, point blank. Regardless of internal management and people use software. people press a button and it produces information. If the information that is given is not something that we can 100% trust, the output is not something you can 100% trust. That's all I'm implying. And I don't think that's to nobody's, that's not pointing fingers at anybody, specifically on this administration, because we consumed or inherited some stuff. My only point is that I would like to see us place more emphasis on the integrity of the data, regardless of what system we use. We can use the most archaic system in the world. That's not an issue. I just would like for us to focus on that and ensure that the information that we get in a data dump is something that can be 100% trusted.
I mean,
And that's it.
As your auditor, I would love for you to be able to implement policies or procedures that were able to remove all of these. I mean, obviously, we wouldn't have commented on them had we not hoped that at some point, and obviously usually never happens in any 1 year, do you eliminate all of these all at once, that at some point you'd be able to put procedures in place. That's the ideal world, right?
Thank
So,
you.
Yeah.
Trustee Tierney, do you have anything else?
No, just thank you guys and Trustee Horn. I know we talked about it before, and I'm glad to see it's up and running and better for Letisa as well.
From the village administrator.
So I have no problems, and I have no doubts it's going to be corrected. Or better, not corrected is better.
Ms. Village Administrator, Ms. Tisa Jones, did you want anything to say regarding some of the comments and looking at the auditor's report?
When we're giving, just so everybody knows, when we're giving the audit report, and when it's given to us, and of where they're letting us know things that we can work on, that we can improve. We inherited this system, so I need everybody to understand, we inherited this system. What we've done as far as being new management is that we've incorporated what we had, what we inherited, and we're expanding on improving now what we have. By us having the new server, that has given us a rise up on what we need to do now as far as moving the village forward. All the documents, we cannot manipulate any information that is put in there, meaning when it comes to payroll, when it comes to our water bills, when it comes to our water accounts, when it comes to any of our accounts. Everything is transported and is put in there. So what we do as a team moving forward from the recommendations from our auditors is that we are moving the village forward, meaning that we are taking everything that we've compiled, that we got together now, and we're moving the village forward for what we have moving ahead. So I looked at the documentation as far as what the auditors have written and of where I understand of where we've been, and I also look as far as the information they've given us of where we're moving forward. So of where all we're doing is we're just moving the village forward in the right direction. And that's from, thank you auditors for giving us that information.
Director Hood or Director Hicks, anything you want to add on to that before we continue? Because I know you guys have took over something that wasn't really functioning for a while and to keep it going to where we're at now. So if you want to add on anything.
No, we're fine. We can move on.
I do have a question, and I never thought of to ask this before. Do you get a SOC 1 from Locus?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay.
I'd have to verify.
But that's something we could ask them for.
Potentially. Do they host your system, or you host it internally? Obviously, yeah. So you probably wouldn't get a SOC 1 if they're not hosting it in the cloud. You only get a SOC 1 if they're hosting and maintaining your data. You want to make sure that and there's several softwares out there like that nowadays. That you want to make sure that they're doing the appropriate stuff to maintain the integrity of your data. Are they doing backups? Are they verifying who has access to your information? Things like that. So,
Okay.
but if you're maintaining it internally, you wouldn't be looking to them to do that. Yeah.
All right, gotcha.
But if you go to a software package in the future that they host it for you, that's definitely something you'd want to ask. Could they provide that to you? Because not all software companies can, unfortunately.
Question. Yes, they do, because now that we have the updated server and everything is current, what they do is they will call us in order to let us know here's a new update that they're doing to the system, or where they remote in and they give us everything. We can pull any reports, anything. So we are being more efficient when it comes to, now that we have the new server, they're able to do the updates concurrent. So that's a plus for us, by us moving to a new server.
I'm going to ask, Madam Mayor, if you have anything you want to add on to, I know taking over, as the mayor in the last 2 years, there's obviously, you've made some decisions and you've put some people in place to make sure things are being covered and are being addressed. So if you want to add on anything, Madam Mayor, you can take a step to the podium.
No.
You're all good with everything? Thank you. Obviously, I want to thank our auditor, and I don't know if you want to continue on anything that was in the back of the book that we talked about originally with the schedule of revenues, expenditures, and changes to fund balances. If was there any funds that that you feel solid with, or just to help with the stability of the community and what we're dealing with here financially?
No, I wasn't going to comment on anything else, but if the board ever has questions for me, I'm happy to answer those. I obviously work for you rather than for management, even though we deal with management on a regular basis. If you ever have questions, I'm only a phone call away or email away nowadays. So.
And we appreciate your opinions on the pages where how to manage and how to do things and deficiencies and positives. I mean, that's a big help, so it helps us continue to keep moving forward. And so, like you said, Mr. Jones said, we're doing the best practices. We're putting things in place right now and obviously looking at different things. And I appreciate the report. I thought it was very well done on the behalf. You made some valid points. The strength of where the village is at, where our pensions play into it as far as it offsets our revenues.
Yeah.
So, but I'm sure every village has to deal with that. It's just how they deal with it and what things they have in place to keep it going, to keep generating income.
Exactly.
So, and again, Broadview is very fortunate to have that good balance of, like you said, the property taxes, our industrial base, and our businesses. So, every little bit helps, everything pays into it. So. We appreciate the report. I thought it was very well done. And thank you for coming to explain it.
Oh, by any means.
So it's a
Happy to
good
be
thing.
here. Happy to be here. So.
And anybody else? Well, he's good. We could dismiss him.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
And
Have a good night. I appreciate
I know
your
we
time.
went a little bit late, but we want to thank you for everything and answering. You have a good night. All right. Are we good to continue? Okay. At this time, our next item on the agenda is, do we have any public comments? If we have any questions for this, because it was a presentation, we could take it at the next village board meeting. Jason. I didn't get his card. I know it's Jason.
You know who that was?
Was that Jason?
Jason Coyle.
Coyle.
First name Jason.
Okay. Next item on the agenda, item number 4, is discuss Village Hall renovations and a 911 center project update. So you're up, Mr. Paul.
Good evening. Is it me, or is everyone hearing kind of like an echo in here with the feedback? Okay.
You guys can hear the echo out there, too?
All right, real quick. I can talk up. Real quick, the fire department is happy. The village offices are happy.
Yes.
There you go.
The citizens are happy because they now have a place to park. But as of the 22nd of last month, the village offices reopened at the 2350 South 25th Avenue, the Village Municipal Center. It is open to the public. They are accepting everything there. So the building department's open, police department's front window is open. You don't have to wait for an officer out in the parking lot anymore. So please come and walk in, take a look around, pay your water bills and everything like that. This project is almost completely done. We still have some fine tuning to do. We have touch-ups. Our court council chambers is still halfway under construction. And that's why I want to say it right now, as I'm sure it's been said elsewhere, that all meetings in May will be held here until further notice. So if something comes up, we're done with the council chambers, we'll be able to move back into the village, but as of right now, everything is still going to be here. We're in the process of moving furniture, finding paperwork that has been tucked away and scrolled away and putting it back where they should be. As far as the 911 communication side, we're still fine-tuning our phone system as well as our radio system, and we should be finished with those testings mid-next week. It was ideally set up to have Maywood be in full operational with us on the 6th, which was yesterday. However, due to scheduling issues with Comcast, we do not have any connectivity between our facility at 2350 South 25th and their facility at 125 South 5th. So pretty much we're waiting on a secondary vendor in order to maintain that connectivity. And that connectivity is pretty important. Number one, it has to deal with monitoring prisoners, jail cells, computer softwares, and so forth. So right now, we're in a holding pattern until approximately the 20th of this month, and then we might extend it a little bit more. Once again, it all has to deal with Comcast. We originally set up a fiber connection. The fiber connection is taking a little bit longer, so now they're in the process of putting in a coax connection. And pretty much for those who are not really familiar with it, it has to deal with pushing information through a straw or through a 4-inch diameter pipe. So there's quite a difference that they're able to do. With that, of course, is necessary permits. Since we're on one side of the Eisenhower and they're on the other side of the Eisenhower, we have permits to deal with the state concerning either going below or above the Eisenhower. As far as financing goes, this is subject to village audit as well as bills that are still outstanding. We're still under our projected dollar amounts. Right now, the cost for Broadview with the Maywood reimbursement, so this is strictly a Broadview cost, is roughly $8.5 million. Now, we still have a lot of materials and bills that are coming forward, but that should be well under the $10 million mark. I want to keep this quick, cheap, but yet to the best possible material and standards as we possibly can do within our timeline. One of the things that was mentioned before with heavy debate and talking concerning the audit, and I can speak to this directly, part of this renovation project was infrastructure inside the village offices as well as its connectivity to the fire department. Just on computer products alone, we laid out $44,000 for servers, computer workstations, and so forth. From my understanding with our subcontractor on the village side who did the work, there was over 130 plus upgrades that needed to be done that couldn't be done based on a server that dated back to early 2000, and the software updates could not be done. It took a little while longer than we anticipated to have that server in place and complete all the updates, including the locusts, and that's something that they're working with. Luckily, that's on the village administrator's side and not on the police side. So that information has been done. So ideally, we're approximately 3 weeks out from being completely done with this project, and my gray hair will not be any more gray hair.
3 weeks away from completion. Okay,
Hopefully.
hopefully. Any questions? Trustee Horn?
No.
Trustee?
Thousands though. Did I hear?
2,000. Trustee Tierney, any questions for Mr.
No, I think
Kurtzner?
great job, Paul. Under budget, on time. Nice job.
I have to commend you. I mean, I had a few times I've been able to get into the village to take a look and to get the sneak peeks and all that, and each day I see something new and something changing, and it's unbelievable. I mean, state of the art. I mean, we're right there on the cutting edge, you know, especially when you looked at when I was in the 911 center, the office space. I just can't believe how much more room is even on the village side for their offices professionally. Just today being in the building commissioner's office and seeing how that's set up. I mean, it's just so much more forward. It's forward thinking, it's more attractive, it's more representative, so that when dignitaries, businesses, corporations want to come in, we have a place to basically entertain these professionals. You know, to have a large mall to, you know, that when you have people in there, Target representatives, or, you know, even the Mullins people, owners can come in, they can talk to the mayor, and there's a conference room, or even on the police department side, I couldn't believe that conference room. So when you have, you know, the state people come or the feds come, it's just so much more appealing. It's unbelievable. I'm sure on your side with the village administrators and the cashiers, I'm sure they're enjoying all that new stuff. I mean, the way it's structured, the way it's set up. So, you know, again, kudos to that, and the village definitely needed that. So I'm very proud to be part of it, you know, especially being a resident here all my life, to see the changes of our community and where we want to go. And I just think the direction of the mayor that wants to keep us moving forward, I think it's really making a statement. So, and just the whole exterior of the building, I thought that was nicely done. The landscaping, the emblem on the building, it's not just the building we're driving by anymore. So, yeah, again, it's amazing. I can't wait for the ribbon cutting ceremony. Can't wait for the residents to totally embrace it. But I think you did a great job, and especially at 911, it's so important with getting that technology and being right there. I guess my question was then, how does that play into our fire department with their systems? They're all in line and they're all good and trained and ready to go too?
Yeah, first of all, we're not done yet. We still have some improvements that are going on outside. As a matter of fact, since you brought up the outside, Thursday, Friday, they're going to be tearing up the entranceway off of 25th Avenue. Due to construction work and stuff like that, they kind of got chewed up with the time, so it's going to be shut down, the entrance off of 25th Avenue into the parking lots. However, you can still enter the village parking lots by going through Village Drive or Mullins Drive, which is between the the municipal building and the fire department. As far as the fire department goes, they also received an update. We're now connected with them fiber optically, so we can exchange information quicker. Their computer services have been upgraded as well. They also inherited a couple things on our side. They are in the process of updating their computer software package and to match with ours, so we're stepping in that direction as well. The toneouts for fire services for both us and Maywood will be increased with the abilities that we've added, so that's going to be a time saver as well. And we've built in a lot of redundancy in the system because, as we all know, you think you have the best thing going, and when that fails, you have nothing to rely back on. And one of the goals that we wanted to do was have multiple levels of redundancy. We just received the clearance on our generator, so if there's any interruption in ComEd power, that generator is kicking on, even if it's just a fluctuation, it detects the fluctuation to provide power throughout the entire building. So there shouldn't be any downwards time as well. And then we have an internal uninterruptible power source in our data center, so we're not losing computers at a little blip. And we all know that sometimes during the summer, when everyone has their air conditioning system on, ComEd can't handle the load, so therefore we built in those redundancies as well. One thing I do have to say, since I did mention ComEd, and this is something that I cannot take credit for, this is strictly on our building commissioner, David Upshaw, is that he was working with Commonwealth Edison concerning an efficiency plan to what was the level of our electricity usage in the old center, the old municipal building, versus the new municipal building. And based on their discussion, we're going to be putting in for a energy reimbursement in the amount of $6,000. Now, granted, on a project that's roughly $10 million, $6,000 doesn't make a difference. However, $6,000 is more than $1. And on the reverse side of that, compounded yearly, is the cost savings that we've received with our utilities based on pre-2018 municipal building to 2019 and further. So hopefully we'll be seeing more longer-term savings as the years progress.
Paul, you talked about the 911 lines going into, obviously, Maywood and Broadview. You talked about getting money back for 911 calls.
Yeah.
Is there an update on that?
update on that. Cook County does not like our proposal. For those of you who are not aware, the village of Maywood is a surcharge for their zip code 60153 encompasses some unincorporated areas. Based on an agreement that was set up back in the mid-90s, the village of Maywood only receives roughly 72% of the surcharge revenue out of the 60153 area code, or zip code, I'm sorry, with 30% of that going to Cook County. I submitted paperwork requesting a more equitable distribution. Cook County did not like my idea, mainly because I asked for 95% of it. But their rebuttal is now down with the state, who will make a final ruling on it, even though I would prefer to work more hand in hand with Cook County so we can both get something out of this. But the 30% was a little bit hard for me to swallow. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Trustee Horn, did you have any questions for Mr. Kirksner?
No, thank you.
Thank you for that great report. We appreciate that. Next is discuss the year-to-date financials, March 2019. Is that Mr. Hicks, Director Hicks?
I'll be very brief so we can move on to the real star of the show tonight, which is fiscal 2020 budget. But revenues for March were $3.3 million, while year-to-date revenues were $14.3 million. The key driver to that was we received a huge disbursement from Cook County for property taxes. Total revenue or expenditures for the month of March was $2.1 million. Year-to-date expenditures was $14 million. Year-to-date expenditures are unfavorable, $375,000 versus year-to-date budget. The key driver there is the timing of contribution for the pension contribution for the fire pension fund and purchase of public works equipment that we need to reclassify to the capital fund. All other departments are favorable or flat versus year-to-date budget. I think, so revenues picked up, like I said, we received $2.2 million in tax disbursements. With only 1 month left in the fiscal year, we're projecting that revenues will be slightly exceed budget. Expenditures are, though, trending unfavorable, mainly to reclasses that need to be posted. When compared to a full year budget, we're trending toward being flat for the year. With that, I'll entertain any questions.
No.
Thank you. Thank you for that report. Next on the agenda is discussion of the fiscal year 2020 budget. Director Hood.
Good evening. Just wanted to let everyone know, tomorrow the public notice will be published. It's going to announce that the budget will be available starting tomorrow to pick up at Village Hall. And we will be having a public hearing on the 20th of May at 6:30 p.m. before the board meeting. So what I'm hoping is that we get all our questions answered between now and the 20th of May, and we'll be able to pass this thing at the board meeting on the 20th. At the budget hearing, we will go through in line-by-line detail, but what I would like to do at this point is just give you the $30,000 feet view of this budget. It's in layman's terms, it's tight. We're projecting an increase in revenue driven primarily by intergovernmental revenues. Our sales tax is exceeding what we budgeted last year, and the state is forecasting a large increase for next year. State income tax is exceeding what we budgeted for last year. The state is expecting it to increase, and this is all driven by, we've got a good economy, people are making money, people are spending money, and we're benefiting from it. Our property taxes, we're expecting to go down a little bit, but that's because we had some flow-through from the TIF rebates, and we got a little bit more money back in the prior years. We're back to just our normal levy. So we are expecting our revenues to go up about $700,000. That's the good news. The bad news is the pension payments are going up by more. So when we sat down and did this and initially started the process, we had to make some cuts, and the department heads came up with $369,000 in reductions in all of their departments. So when we look across each department, the executive departments come up, is about $54,000 less than last year. The village clerk is up just a hair, but that has to do with the codification expense. Boards and commission, we're going to increase their budget a little bit just because we just have to, we're running out of people on our list. We may have to do some more testing. But then when we get back down to the finance department, they've cut about $7,000 off of it. Municipal and buildings is cut $50,000 off of it, but that's not as impressive as it sounds, because what we were experiencing last year was our public works department was doing the work and getting charged, so I moved that part of the expense to public works. Then we get to our big areas. I'm sorry, I'm skipping building. Building is increased slightly, but that has more to do with a part-time employee. When we get to our bigger expenses, the fire department, even though their pension increased by $346,000, their overall increase in spending is only $124,000 because they were able to cut back in several other areas. The same for the police department. I didn't write it down. Oh, here it is. The police department pension increased by $412,000, but their overall budget is only up $45,000. The difference between the pension increase and the overall increase. The streets department actually is coming in at an $83,000 savings, and that includes absorbing those costs I mentioned from the building department. So those are our major departments. So with the cuts that have come through the department heads, we are projecting to have around a $50,000 surplus for the year. The rest of the funds are, I'll just go through them quickly until we get to the capital fund, because I know that's why everybody came tonight. The garbage fund is pretty much on track to do exactly like last year. There's not any big changes. IMRF, we will be making the normal transfer to cover the fees related to Social Security, FICA, and IMRF payments. MFT is, if you guys remember last year, we were talking about how we could do those two streets with some money that we had in the capital fund and then fund Braga this year through MFT. You're seeing that in this budget. The MFT budget includes phase 2 of the Braga project, so the construction part will be starting. The other place where we're going to see another public works project or capital project is a CDBG fund, where a green infrastructure project that's improving some of the alleyways on the north side are going to happen. As of today, the ETS fund, which is actually approved by another board, isn't done yet to be put in here, but its approval is by the ETS board, and not so much this. We put this in here because it's included in our financials. Roosevelt and most of the TIFs, there's nothing major going on in there. What is there to say about any of the TIFs? It's the normal stuff. You know, we're paying the people that have redevelopment agreements with us. Some of them are actually producing a little bit more money at this time. So that's straightforward. We'll go into more detail at the budget hearing. That takes us down to debt service. It looks like this year we're fine because we haven't started paying the capital fund yet, so we have enough money from the rollover bond to take care of the debt service this year. And then we'll get to the capital projects fund, which is what everybody wants to hear about. So mainly included in the capital projects fund this year are several items that are carryovers. And as Paul was saying earlier, we're not done yet. And some of the things that may have happened since April 30th, if we've got any bills, aren't included in here. So we are going to be still putting aside $2 million, a little over $2 million to finish off that project. And there's also another expense of $233,000 that's related to the equipment that's going into that project. We are going, oh, I'm sorry, I just realized there was something on the TIF funds. The parking lot behind the Mrs. Kim project will be done through in the Roosevelt TIF. And then in the capital fund, we are putting aside money to purchase a right-of-way to get the Braga project done. We have put in there the other, I'm trying to think of the word I'm looking for here. It's MWRD grant that's going to let us do more green infrastructure alleys on the north side. So that'll be coming out of here. And when I say that it's coming out of here, our portion is coming out of here. That's kind of how this was prioritized. We had X amount of dollars, and we matched it up with other funds. So we're looking to get a little over $722,000 in grant funds. Well, actually, not looking to get, we've already got them. So all we've got to do now is do the work, pay our share, and they will pay they will pay their portion. So each one of these projects that have matching funds, we are putting into the capital improvements budget. That includes the $170,000 for the 25th Avenue project that's got a Cook County grant. There's a Cook County grant to help on the Braga costs. There is the MWRD grant, which will be helping on the alley project. That alley project's about $582,000. The grant is going to give us $407,615. That's a pretty good contribution. I think I've covered all the major ones. There are some professional services in here that I might want to mention also. We'll go into more detail at the hearing, but we're making sure that we have shovel-ready projects. So when capital funds become available, I don't know if you guys have been watching the news, that's getting to be more of a possibility every day. We're going to have plans on the shelves to go after that money and hopefully get those projects done. In addition to that, well, I'll take questions. Anybody have any questions?
Anything?
Yeah, first I want to just go on record saying that I know related to the shovel-ready projects and the department heads having to maintain their budgets and cut them. I want to say thank you to the mayor, because I know she was big on that. I would ask a bunch of questions, and she was always mentioning those two things, so I'm glad to hear about that. But I do have one question. If we are trending towards a tight budget and flat per U2, then how can we justify taking or incurring more debt, such as like the IEPA loan?
Okay, that's actually, well, okay, I'll go into a little explanation. The IPEA loan is not funding any of these projects. There would be projects related to the IEPA loan, but the IPEA loan will be funded totally through the water fund and off of water revenue, not the general fund revenue, the capital fund revenue. So it's kind of, you got to think of the water fund kind of like of its own business. So what it makes is supposed to be reinvested back into the infrastructure and to maintain and modernize our water structure. And this is a whole separate finance meeting that will be coming soon. But essentially, we have to look at the structure of that, of what we make on our water. What will it support us borrowing to modernize our infrastructure? So getting the loan is tied to, or getting the projects done are tied to getting the loan, which is tied to making sure we have a high enough margin to cover the debt load.
From the water fund.
From the water fund, right, not from the general fund.
the big thing on the IAP loan is it's a revolving loan, and it's meaning that you can go back to, you may get approved for $10 million. Doesn't mean you have to borrow $10 million because they're not going to lend you $10 million unless you show the capability to show from from whatever proceeds that you're going to pledge against the loan that you can make those payments. So one is that it has nothing to do with the operating budget. Two is that IAPA, because it's such a low interest rate loan, they make sure that you're capable of paying the loan back from whatever proceeds that you pledge against the loan. The other thing, too, is the reason why it's a revolving loan is that they understand that villages of our size are not capable of borrowing the type of money that's needed to take care of the infrastructure, the water infrastructure that's almost 100 years old and do it all at once. So the big part of it is why it takes so long is that you have to put together a comprehensive plan on how you're going to tackle the project as a total, as in total. So then they know that, okay, this is a smart strategic decision for the village to do the project and to do it in phases. So we may get approved for $10 million, but we'll do it fiscal year by fiscal year to determine how much we would actually draw down that they say we could draw down that we can support from our water fund to say that we'll, and then do that for that particular fiscal year. And then the next fiscal year, we may be more healthier than the previous fiscal year, and we may be able to draw down more than what we've drawn down the previous year. So as we draw down and pay back, then we go back. And that's the beauty of the loan, is that it's revolving. So as you draw down, you can go back. It's not like they give you $2 million and say, you pay us back and you're done and you got to come back through the whole process. No, they say, hey, we feel you guys can support $10 million. Here's the ability to do that over a period of time, and we would draw down what we could afford to pay back from the water fund.
Could I add a little to that? Another way to look at this is just another tool in our toolbox. Because once we have gotten approval of this loan and we have this revolving feature, we can then take advantage of other capital grants where we have to have matching funds. So if the state or the feds come out and say, we've got $10 million, if you go put in your $10 million or $5 million or whatever they come out with, we can then borrow this money at a low rate to provide our matching half and then basically get double the work done by bringing the Fed or the state money in. So the object isn't let's say if it's 10 million, the object isn't to spend all 10 million right away. It's to get it set up, get some projects that we can reasonably pay for, that we can pay off through the water funds. Let's say it's getting $500,000 a year, and if we borrow $2.5 million after 5 years, that'd be paid off. Then we can borrow something else, and we can just keep staggering those projects and that borrowing, but leave us the opportunity to exploit future opportunities. So down the road, if the feds are talking about a big, massive infrastructure rebuild, if they don't just give us the money and they want matching funds, maybe we'll be able to do that. It's kind of like the Braga project, where it's an $8 million project, but we only come up with $2 million. And we just want to have that tool in our tool bag to go to when these other opportunities come along. Plus, in addition to that, there are things that need to be done, and that is what we're trying to get through this, help me out, guys. Well, that study, because part of getting that is having the engineering plans done. So, and that's the part that's been coming up in front of the board recently, is they want to go ahead and get the engineering done, so we now have these 5 projects sitting there that have been approved and part of this fund, so we could draw money from the fund to do those projects.
Do we pay any of the funds back from the general fund?
Do we pay any of the funds back?
Or allocate funds from general fund to any other fund to offset any debts or expenses?
Yes, and they're in they're in the very bottom of, when you see it, you will see it's after the Public Works Department. IMRF is the normal one. In the past, we ran the capital improvement portion of the rollover bond through there, and I was not given a reasonable reason why, so I'm just putting it right in the capital fund this year. And what else do we transfer, Tim? CDBG has traditionally been done through there, but because we're tight in the general fund, we're going to use some of that money in the capital fund to fund the CDBG project. I use the condensed version. Oh, actually, hold on. Maybe I do have it.
We have to go into specifics.
Yeah.
We do from time to time support other funds from when we have a surplus in the general fund. So that's the purpose of being able to do that, is to sustain activity in other funds based on the availability of funds, the surplus from the general fund.
Are there any expenses being paid from the water fund right now? Other than just recurring expenses, any debts? I mean, we don't talk about the water fund a lot, that's why I'm asking a question. And the fact that we need to approve a loan, you know, the engineering and things of that nature, I'm trying to better understand the position of that fund.
Okay.
And whether or not we can actually support it.
Yes. There are some expenses that we budget every year in there, and most of them are like emergency water fund repair. The cost of purchasing the water is probably the biggest expense in the fund. And then there's a bunch of miscellaneous.
Is do we pay water fund expenses out of the general fund? Is that your question?
Yes.
And we do not.
We do not.
Okay.
Water fund is a self-sustaining fund.
And we'll be completely supporting the loan directly from the water fund.
Correct.
Yeah, that's one of the conditions of the loan.
Okay.
Because you cannot, you can't pledge some of your general funds toward the payment of this IAP loan. So that's why we have to, you know, at a different point in time, be able to not subsidize the water rates to the residents that we've been doing for the past, you know, however many ever years since the City of Chicago has increased water rates every year for the past probably 10 years. And so we, as a village, has not passed on those water rate increases. And so that'll be one of the things that we would look at to be able to say, if we just did these water increases to account for the increases that have occurred in the past that we never passed on, then we'll be able to substantiate how we're going to pay back the loan strictly from the water fund, which you have to be able to do, which is why this process is such an extensive process, because they put you through the ringer to make sure that you're on solid footing from your fund that you're going to generate the activity from. So, I mean, if it was whatever the activity is, it has to be the source of the funds to pay back the loan has to be from something other than your general fund.
Okay. Thanks. It is.
I have no question.
I just have a comment regarding Director Hicks and Director Hood. You know, their availability to all the trustees is unbelievable. I mean, they will meet with any trustee to discuss any concerns or issues, and we deeply appreciate that. And I know since I've been as the finance chair and just being able to get things to see where we're at as far as the numbers and the village stability, I think you guys are doing a great job. And I know going into this budget again this year, you know, everybody's got to tighten up the ship and pull their weight. But again, the availability of your guys' time, we deeply appreciate it. You know, I've met with you guys numerous times on different occasions, on different days, just so that we know that, we know what the village's footing is and the dollars and what's being spent and what's coming in. And again, I think the team that's been assembled, that even, kudos to you as well, one of Ms. Jones, is that even your people, just everybody's on point and they're doing what they have to do. And so, again, you have a lot of moving pieces when it comes to financial stuff, but the point is everybody's working together, the numbers are available, the transparency's there, items, documents, whatever we need. And I know we have 3 new trustees coming on board, so I want them to really take advantage of meeting with these individuals that have these departments so that you fully understand how, when somebody comes to the window to pay a bill, like what goes on, and exactly talking to our budget and to our finance to know what the village is spending and what we're faced with, because there is a reality. We have employees here, and that's a reality. They need pensions, they have benefits, so, that's a big chunk of what our revenue is, as just as well as us as homeowners. We have a stake in how the direction of this village is going. So, I want to make sure our new trustees take full advantage and get to know what's going on behind the scenes, as well as what everybody's doing to make sure the numbers are there so that we can keep functioning, keeping the lights on, I guess, in general. And I'm very proud, again, of what the mayor's put in place, the transparency. If there's something that we need, it's available. We get it. So, you don't have to worry about anything. And these guys are so open. So, again, I want to thank you guys on that. I have nothing more else to say. I think that was the end of our agenda, correct? Pardon me? The budget? Do you have a quick question? I know I didn't want to keep you guys late and long here, but it's the first one. But go ahead, Mrs. Redmond. I didn't expect it to go that long, but I guess with the auditors, so.
It's okay, I appreciate it. First of all, a couple questions. You said the budget will be ready starting tomorrow, maybe Thursday. And the meeting is going to be on the 20th or whatever day, right before our next board meeting.
It's Monday.
That Monday. My concern is that you all are going to be looking at the numbers a lot longer than what me as a resident is going to be looking at them. Who do I go to ask if I've got a question prior to the meeting? Because I would think at 6:30 you're going to make a presentation. That'll eat up part of the time, and then you got a regular board meeting. So I'm asking that as residents, we have ample time to at least take a look at it and understand what your overall view of the meeting, of the budget is. Am I clear on that? Is it a presentation at 6:30?
Yeah.
No,
There'll be a
just, if you email me, I will respond.
Okay, so we'll get the budget, okay, and then we can, and go from there. All right, also, regarding the water fund, and I know you said this is a separate conversation, but that is an important conversation that's going to be part of this budget, too, I would think, if you're going to be, increasing rates. When is that meeting anticipating being to talk about water rates and what's happening?
I put it in the budget as if nothing was going to happen. So I did not make any assumptions that we will be making more money. I went as is. If we do make the decision through the process to do that, then we'll address that at that time.
Okay, so we'll know.
But I'd love to get that started as soon as possible. Let's get the budget out of the way and get right on that, because it is important. We get all our ducks in a row, because you never know what's going to be coming down the line 6, 8, 12 months from now when they get their act together on the Fed level and let that $2 trillion go.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, and then the last thing, because I wanted to also make a compliment. I really appreciate everybody, but I especially appreciate you, Paul Kirshner, and the way you do business. I have to tell you, I have followed this project from the time you had meetings, and you're very thorough, and you go through, and you speak in English that we can understand. And it's not, and I appreciate everyone else, but you seem to have that ability to, to explain it. And I thank you, whether it's part of your job or not, it seems like you go beyond. So thank you.
Anything else? Anything in closing? We're good? All right, I'm going to call this meeting adjourned then. So, do I have a second? Thank you. Thank you. Meeting is adjourned. I want to thank everyone, to our residents here, as well as our residents at home viewing this. It was a lot of information, and again, thank you so much for this. And as you heard, on May 20th at 6:30, there'll be a public hearing on our budget. prior to our village board meeting. And the meetings will be held here at the Broadview Park District. And again, we want to thank the Broadview Park District because we are a guest here, so we deeply appreciate them allowing us to have our meetings here. Thank you, and everyone have a good night.